Recording started.
Good afternoon. Welcome to the New York State Council on the Arts Architecture and Design Project Support webinar. You should all be muted for this call. If you are not, I encourage you to mute yourself. I think I successfully did that. I'm your host. I am Kristin Herron, Program Director for Architecture and Design and Museums here at the New York State Council on the Arts. You can see how to contact me via email and my telephone number. It's critical with the email to spell my name correctly or you'll get a bounce back. For the webinar this afternoon, I will be speaking for maybe about a half an hour. I have a presentation to share. I'm asking all of you, as you develop questions, to use the chat function in this webinar. It should be in the top right-hand corner of your screen. You can send me a question via chat. At the end, I will read those questions and provide answers. I will not identify who you are, and I will not identify who's in this webinar, so you should feel comfortable asking any question you want, because I will not indicate who is asking me a specific question. You may see a ghost of a box, which is me pulling up either my chat screen or my participant list. So first I want to make sure that you are attending the meeting you think you're attending. Today's webinar is focused on organizations that intend to submit an application for project support to the Architecture and Design Program at NYSCA for the fiscal year 2017 funding cycle, which will reflect projects that will be occurring between January 1st, 2017 and December 31st, 2017. If your organization is currently receiving general operating support via an active multi-year grant, or you're applying this year for general operating support in the Architecture and Design Program, then this seminar is not for you, because an organization may submit only one request to project support or general support in the Architecture and Design Program. Organizations may apply elsewhere at the Council, but here it's only GOS or project support in Architecture and Design. The New York State Council on the Arts was established in 1960, and NYSCA, which I will use to refer to the New York State Council on the Arts throughout this webinar, provides competitive grants across 16 programs. Architecture and Design is but one of those 16. And last year, the agency provided over $40 million of funding throughout these 16 programs. The Architecture and Design Program had just over $1.1 million out of that $40 million to distribute across the state last year. Design is everywhere. That's the mantra of this program. From the Montauk Lighthouse to Buffalo's Olmsted Parks, from Manhattan's skyscrapers to Adirondack camps, from Russell Wright tableware to Tiffany jewelry, New York State boasts testaments to the importance of design in the world around us. The Architecture and Design Program supports organizations and individuals working to further innovation and excellence in the design arts, to promote the preservation of New York State's architectural and design heritage, and to encourage the development of design literacy for all New Yorkers. What is project support? Project support are programs, projects which promote an understanding of architecture or design and may be directed to a general or professional audience. The typical programming we see in this program include exhibitions, publications, workshops, conferences, public programs, or services to the field. And the Architecture and Design Program accepts requests in the fields of architecture, landscape architecture, historic preservation, fashion, graphic, industrial, and interior design. But there are some areas that this program does not fund. the Architecture and Design program does not fund restoration, preservation, or maintenance projects. Any capital efforts should be applied for in the facilities program. I encourage you to look at arts.ny.gov under the facilities program for potential support for capital equipment, design studies, so conceptual, schematic, or design development, or construction in the capital projects category. There are a number of restrictions that come out of 1987 legislation, which is partially why this program does not fund restoration, preservation, or maintenance, but which is where the facilities program may be of help if you are eligible. If you need support for historic structures report, building conditions reports, cultural landscape reports, cultural resource surveys, those are supported through our partner, the Preservation League of New York State. They manage a program called Preserve New York. That's open right now. That application deadline's in April, and I encourage you to look to their website for more information on those programs. They also manage on our behalf technical assistance grants, which are very modest $3,000 awards, which typically go towards building conservation or condition assessments that are more modest reviews of your structure and its needs. For those of you familiar with this program, one change from the past is that we are no longer providing support solely for salary support for a position. This is largely because our Regional Economic Development Council program has a category called Workforce Development. They have more money for this. They're able to award larger grants if you're successful. So if you need salary support for a position, which is the entirety of your project, I encourage you to wait later in the year and apply to the REDC for that. And in the meantime, you can also now apply to Architecture and Design for another project. How much can my organization request? Well, the basics are that the minimum award that NYSCA can offer is $2,500. And because project support grants must be no more than 50% of the total budget, a $2,500 award would be on a project that is at most costing you $5,000 to complete. My editorial comment here is that there is a lot of administrative work involved in submitting a request to NYSCA. I don't actually like to support $2,500 projects because I want you to come in for something bigger. So you're allowed to. We will absolutely consider a request, but I would encourage anyone listening to come in for a project really that's no smaller than a total of a $10,000 budget where you're asking NYSCA for at least $5,000. It will be more worth your time and effort in going through our process. Typically, the grants are not larger than about $25,000. It all depends on how much money I have in my budget in a given year. How do we decide who gets funded? The NYSCA review process is similar across the agency. The first step, of course, is that you have to go through our application process and submit all the necessary materials. The next step, once everything comes in, is that NYSCA staff, and for Architecture and Design, that's me, will go through all of the applications to make sure they are eligible, to make sure you have actually submitted everything you are required to submit. Once I am assured that the applications are complete, or I've had to mark those incomplete, sadly, this includes making sure your organization is pre-qualified in the Grants Gateway by the application deadline. I'm not discussing pre-qualification in depth in this webinar. There will be resources for that on our website soon. If you don't know what I'm talking about when I say being pre-qualified, then when you're done with this conference call, go directly to grantsreform.ny.gov to find out how you can become pre-qualified. If you know what this is, you just need to be sure your organization remains in that status as of the application deadline up until the minute that the deadline is listed as, because as soon as we pass that deadline, minutes later, we print a list of who is not pre-qualified, and we are required to knock those requests out. I will interject here to say we do not have the application deadline yet established. However, I can give you these hints. We expect, our guidelines are live right now on the website at arts.ny.gov. We expect the application will open within 2 weeks, and the anticipated deadline will be either the end of March or the very beginning of April. So hopefully that's at least a little bit helpful to you in planning out your work. Please do not wait to the last week to work on submitting this application. It will really negatively impact you in so many ways because the process is lengthier than you may realize. So back to the review process. I've determined that your request is eligible. I'm going to read every request. I'm going to take copious notes critiquing the request because that's how we read them. We read them with a critical eye. I'm looking to see how your request meets our criteria and how well you explained what you do as an organization in the context of the project you are submitting. We will then send those materials, your supporting documents in your application, to a peer review panel. On the NYSCA website right now, you can see the list of about 14 names who served on the architecture and design panel last year. We're still taking nominations and going through our process to approve the roster for this year. But from that list, I have 7 folks representing a range of institutions and projects that might come in, representing different parts of the state and different design fields, who read your application, who look at your supporting documents, who come to our offices to deliberate over those requests. And they are evaluating the requests based on NYSCA's 3 criteria: artistic, programmatic quality, managerial fiscal competence, and service to the public. And as you see when you look at the guidelines, the narrative questions are arranged to reflect those 3 criteria. Each application is rated by the panelists on a scale of 1 to 9 for each of the 3 criteria. It's a scale that's very wide, so I always instruct our panelists to use the wide range of that scale. We tend to receive at least twice the amount of requests that I have, amount of money that I have in the budget, so difficult decisions have to be made. It's also no secret that I tell the panel that to me a 9 should be a rarity. A 9 is the epitome of, it's an exemplary project. There has never been a solid 9 in any of the programs I oversee, which I consider a good thing because you have these great resource of these 7 panelists looking at your project, looking at your application, and they're able to provide some constructive criticism, whether you're funded or not, that hopefully will help you in your project moving forward. Those are notes that you can call me to hear about after the process concludes in the fall. The panelists will come up with their scores. They will be averaged to a single score. We're going to take a look at them at the end of our review period, and we're going to make sure that the final number that your project is receiving accurately reflects the narrative comments I've written down. I or the panel may ask to revisit a request where we feel the score does not actually meet the discussion. We're a government agency, we're a bureaucracy, but we don't want those bureaucratic numbers to be more powerful than the narrative conversation. So if I see a request where my notes are very positive but the score seems low, I'm going to ask them to reconsider it. It might be it was the first one they reviewed and they're being extra critical at the beginning. It might be they're hungry and they wanted to go to lunch and they moved too fast. We go back over everything. I want you to be assured that your requests are reviewed very thoroughly and very in-depth, very cautiously to make sure that the panel has been fair as they possibly can to everyone. Our panel will leave by identifying for me where they believe the funding should go, what scores deserve the funding, and then it's my job back at my desk with my budget to create a very logical pattern of how that funding goes, which typically is the higher awards go to the higher scores, and I have to make my budget balance. So how many requests get funded and for how much depends upon how much money I have available and how many requests have come in that are strong requests. Those recommendations are presented to the New York State Council on the Arts Council members, our board. There's a meeting where we have a panelist representative, it's webcast, and they have the opportunity to ask us questions. And then our full council meets, and it is not until they meet and approve the recommendations that we consider a grant has been made. So the application narrative, or what we want to know about your project, this is the core of what you will be doing. I'm going to go over each section and kind of give you some highlights of where I see issues or where the panelists see issues, and I hope this will be helpful. So the artistic programmatic quality, there are 5 questions in this section, but depending on your project, you may not need to answer them all. You will need to describe your project, detail the background and qualifications of your project staff, describe the involvement of any living artists or designers, and discuss any use of technology. When you describe your project, remember you're speaking to peers in the field, but they don't know your project, so you have to make it very clear what it is you're doing. Don't assume anyone knows. Make sure your exhibition demonstrates what your thesis is, what the focus of your exhibition is, as an example. And always remember that your project must meet the priorities of the architecture and design program and must reflect one or more of the design fields which the program supports. The program summary, as I mentioned, is where it's important to give us as many details about your project as possible. Number 2 is a question only for exhibitions. If you do not have an exhibition, if you're not coming in for that, then you simply enter NA, or if the system allows you, you can leave that blank. The managerial fiscal section, there are 5 questions here, and this is another situation where your project may not require you to answer all of them. You are going to have to discuss how your project meets your organizational mission and any long-range or strategic plan. You will have to detail the workflow plan that reflects the NYSCA contract period and identify other sources of funding for your project. I want to go back to detail the work plan that reflects the NYSCA contract period. You are applying for funds for calendar year 2017. Your project may have started in 2016. Perhaps it's an exhibition, and part of it starts in 2016, but it opens in 2017. Perhaps it's an education program that you've been developing in 2016, but you will implement in 2017. If you want to show the panel the full range of the work plan to complete this project, you can, but you need to identify in your narrative that you understand we can only fund those activities that happen in 2017, and you can only use what happens in 2017 as a match for that project. What we don't want is a work plan that goes further than the year 2017 and is not clearly delineating what you're asking for. You don't want the panel to have to guess whether something is happening in the allowed time period or not. Similarly, the project budget should only reflect costs to be incurred in the year 2017, not necessarily the full cost of your project, and you can explain that in the narrative. This budget reflects only the work happening in 2017. The total cost of this project is actually X, but we've incurred some of those costs in a different year. If your project involves a publication or it's a workshop or symposia, there are additional questions that you will have to answer. It's really giving you the space to provide the necessary information that we need to understand those types of projects. Number 10 in managerial fiscal is a question about finances. So the New York State Council on the Arts can only support up to 50% of a project's cost. And again, up to 50% of the project's cost that occurs in the year 2017. And you, as the organization applying, need to detail where the rest of those funds are coming. We really want to know, do you have pending sources? Do you have secured sources? This is an opportunity narratively to expand upon your project budget. You'll have a project budget notes section, but please use this section to detail, we're applying to the X Foundation. We don't know if they're going to fund us, but they've always funded us in the past. Those kinds of details are really critical. I always tell folks the following things with terms of the match. The strongest match is the one that's always already in hand, and you need to tell us that if you have it already confirmed. The next is that you have some funds confirmed, or that you're reaching out to individuals or foundations who have a history of funding you. And if you don't have that confirmed, but there is a history, you need to tell us that. And the weakest is that you're just throwing your request out everywhere, you're not sure who's going to fund you, you don't have a history, you're not sure if they're going to come through. That's the weakest match here, but if you have those stronger matches, you need to delineate them so that we know that there's a history. I also want to throw something out in this section. While project support is focused on analyzing artistic, programmatic, managerial, fiscal, and public service for that project, if your organization has any serious fiscal issues, if you have ongoing deficits, or if you have ongoing surpluses, because we're going to see those in the organizational budget you're required to submit, I encourage you in this section, number 10, to address that. Although this category is not assessing you as an organization, if the panel sees either that you have significant ongoing surplus, they're going to then ask why you're asking NYSCA for funding. If they see you have a significant ongoing deficit, they're going to question whether it is in the best interest of the council to invest in an institution that may have bigger problems. So it might be that your books are showing something one year that are, you had money come in one year that's designated for another year. There may be many reasons why you're showing a deficit or surplus. This is an opportunity to show. If it's a modest one, if it's just a percentage or two of your budget, that's not so critical, but if it's something more significant, I encourage you to address that here. You don't want the panel guessing why your organizational budget is showing deficits or surpluses. Service to the public is the third section. There are 5 questions. You will have to address who your primary audience for this project is, define any educational or interpretive components, go over your marketing plan for this project, and detail your expectations and how you're going to evaluate whether or not you're able to meet the goals of your project. We also ask in every project support request at the council the community context question. I want to stress that an answer of not applicable is not acceptable for this question. That begs all kinds of questions from the panel and puts a serious dent in the score that you're likely to receive. The reason is you need to know what other arts organizations are in your area, what other activities are similar to yours. You need to say how they support or enhance or differ from your project. If you are in a part of the state where you really are sort of the only arts organization in a reasonable area, you can say that, but then we want to hear about who your partners, who you collaborate with, because it may not be another arts organization, but it may be a different nonprofit or for-profit in your community. I am confident that every organization can either talk about who else is in their community and or talk about partnerships and collaborations. So don't just say, we do partner. Tell us who they are. Tell us what you partner on. Don't just say there are other organizations. Let us know that you know the ecosystem in which you work. This is a really important question, and I'll give an example. In architecture and design, we often see a lot of requests for walking tours, which can be very engaging and wonderful. They can also be perceived as everybody does it. So that's an example where this is so important to know who else is doing walking tours in Manhattan, say, and why yours are different than everybody else's, or why yours contribute in a way that no one else's do. Supporting materials are required for this category, as all at NYSCA, and you may wonder why we list as a question, please submit the required supporting materials and list them in your narrative. There's a couple of reasons for that. I want to make sure that you know you have to submit supporting documents, so that's why I make you list them. It's also a way for me to check if you've listed the supporting documents in the narrative, then I know that you either uploaded them or you intended to upload them. So it's a double check for me. If there's nothing here and there's no supporting documents, it says to me that you didn't read the guidelines. So read the guidelines, tell me what you're submitting, and make sure you upload them. And these are the documents that you need to submit. I need a resume or a biographical statement of the project staff or any consultant. There should be no more than a page per person. And when it comes to a biographical statement or a resume that's condensed to a page, please make sure that someone's 20-page CV is condensed to this one page to reflect the skills they have directly related to this project. I've seen biographical statements that make no sense as to why that person is working on this project, and then later I see their very lengthy CV and see they had all kinds of relevant experience, but that's not what was submitted with the grant. So make sure it's edited to show the relevant experience. You can provide up to 15 images, usually in a PDF or a PowerPoint is what we prefer, or a website reference to provide illustrations for your project. If you're using PowerPoint like I am today, this I consider one slide. You could have 2 images in this slide, and 15 images is 15 slides. So if you put 2 images in each, that's 30 images. That's okay, but don't put more than 1 image in a slide unless there's a real point to it. Maybe they're comparisons and contrasts. Definitely don't show me a slide with a kaleidoscope of images that has 20, 10, 15 images in it in one slide, because they then get so small that it becomes meaningless. Think very carefully about what images you're using, because these are the images that tell the same story as your narrative, or ideally they do. If you're coming in for an exhibition, we want to see some of the objects that you intend to include in the exhibition, and we want to see examples of your exhibition designer's past work. If you're coming in for an education program, I think sometimes this can be a challenging request to submit visuals for. I don't just want to see groups of people. I want somehow for you to be able to capture what happens in this program. So it can be a mix of the audience and then what actually occurs, or the objects that are being used, or the building that is being explored through the project. So think very carefully about how those images parallel the story you're telling in your narrative. You can submit one other thing, and it depends on what your project is. These are some suggestions. An exhibition design layout or a sample script, if you're coming in for that. If it's a catalog or publication, an outline in sample text. That's incredibly important if you are coming in for a publication, because we want to see if the author writes clearly and if it's engaging. If it's a workshop, I want to know about marketing materials, similar for public programs or services to the field. If you have a question about what that third document might be, if you want to submit something other than one of these, you should feel free to reach out to me and ask. We give you a little bit of leeway on this third one, but it should be something that provides support for your project. It's not letters of support from politicians, for example, that is not impactful in any way with the New York State Council on the Arts. If you are, for example, doing a service to the field and you're working with specific organizations, this might be the letter confirming that they are working with you, because that can sometimes be a question. But always ask if you are uncertain what else you should submit. I would like to open up to some questions now. The way to ask me a question is to go up again in the right-hand corner. There is a chat box that exists. You can type in a message to me. These are private, so no one else is going to see your question, and I am happy to answer any question that might come in. Again, the way to do this is through the chat box. So one question I have is whether the applicant wants to know, will I get all of what I ask for? So often you do not get the full request. Sometimes you do. It really depends. You should ask for the amount that you believe you need without begging the question that whether or not you have the capacity to do the project. It really depends on how well your project rates based on the application submitted and how much money I have in the budget. I can't give you more than you asked for, but I can give you less, I being NYSCA. So you don't always receive the full amount, unfortunately. Another question is there only one round per year? Yes, there is only one round per year. when the application deadline closes in either late March or early April, we will not be accepting any other applications for funding for the year 2017. You would then have to wait until we reopened for the year 2018. Another question is whether this presentation will be available later. Absolutely. I'm recording right now. When we're done, it'll just take a short time for the WebEx system to send that recording to me. It will be posted on the NYSCA website. So if you go to arts.ny.gov, you're going to need to scroll down about halfway on the home page, and as the webinars are completed, there is a link provided there. There should be 2 up right now for general operating support and independent projects. I will caution you only that you will probably have to download at least a temporary application in order to be able to play the recorded webinar. If you have any difficulty with that, please shoot me an email at kristin.herron@arts.ny.gov, and I'll see what I can do. There is a way for us to make them WMV files, but it's pretty time-consuming, so we're hoping this system works well. Let me see the other questions I have. Oh, great question. Is there a list somewhere of past projects funded in this program? There is, but it's not, I'm going to be honest, the simplest function to use. So the way to find that out is to go to arts.ny.gov. There's a link, I think it's at the top. I think it's the 3rd one down that will say past NYSCA funding. If you click on that, you'll be able to search by fiscal year by program. So for last year, you could choose architecture and design. You could choose fiscal year 16, and it will then, and then press submit, and you can produce an Excel chart as well as just a list of organizations. That's going to be all the funding in the architecture and design program. That's going to be the general operating support, the projects, and the independent projects. So that's really the only way that we have that available, but you can check back through a number of years of funding. I have some more questions. I just have to scroll down in my chat box. Can a project support request, this is a great one, can a project support request be a broad-ranging project like preservation programs that range from advocacy workshops, lectures, tours, or does it need to be one aspect? I thank this individual for asking the question. And I'm going to have a little bit of a long-winded answer, which I apologize for, but I hope it's helpful. The New York State Council on the Arts used to have a category called general program support, which it no longer has. It was an unrestricted category that was focused more on public and educational programming. What we have done since that was abandoned is indeed this project support category can include a bundling of programs. This tends to be in the case of preservation organizations who have a strong advocacy component. And what I mean by that is we need to fund the programs that are about educating and interpreting and sharing information on the design arts. Efforts that are really important to save historic structures, but that involve petitions or political fights. So shall we say, to be friendly, any kind of petitions, that's not something that we can fund as an arts council. So I have moved some preservation organizations into project support where we focus solely on that bundling of their programs. I can say that those organizations have done that recently, have been successful. They've received, I place all of those organizations together when they are reviewed by panel, and I make a case for a little bit for the higher awards if they have rated well because we're bundling a number of programs together. That's the long-winded answer. So the short answer is yes. You can bundle them together. If you are an organization thinking of doing this, I definitely encourage you to reach out to me directly. I know who asked this question, and so that would be absolutely appropriate for your organization. Anyone else, definitely feel free to ask me directly. Is the application submitted on Grants Gateway? I am afraid to say that yes, it is. The Grants Gateway is not the easiest system to use. I'm sorry. It's what New York State now uses. NYSCA will have, as we did last year, both some recordings and a manual to help you through that process. Another question, is 2017 defined as July 1st, 2016 to June 30th, 2017? Not anymore. So when we talked about a fiscal year, those fiscal years used to reflect different contract periods. Starting 2 years ago, NYSCA has moved to all contracts, all new applications will follow a calendar year system. So everybody applying new this year is applying for January 1st, 2017 to December 31st, 2017. Another question, what are good support materials for the third example if you're an education program? That's a great question. So it could be if your education program is a publication, and the person I know who asked this question, so I know a little bit about that program. If it's a publication, if it's something you're giving out, that would be a great supporting document to submit. If it is another type of program, it could be any, you could scan brochures you use, you could provide links to whatever methods you use to make the program, make people aware of the program. So it could be either the marketing materials, or it could be, for example, your curriculum plans, if you wanted the panel to see how you're, sort of the behind the scenes, what you're using to develop the programs. It can be any number of things, and definitely we can talk more specifically about any program, but those are just some examples. Another question, how can we get feedback for our application from last year? When this webinar is over, I've just put the slide up with my contact information. I would absolutely encourage you to first email me and tell me the name of your organization and request your panel feedback. I can only give that to you verbally, so over the telephone. So if you email me, we will schedule time. I've already scheduled time to talk to some folks tomorrow, for example. So I'm happy to schedule that as soon as possible to go over the feedback from an application last year. The panel wants you to hear the feedback. They try to be helpful in their criticism, so whether you've been funded or not funded, it's always good to get that feedback. You may disagree with what the panel thought. That's your prerogative. On the other hand, you may find that it helps you write your application because maybe the panel didn't understand the application the way it was written, or maybe they give you a point that you say, wow, if I talked about that more, I realized where they would have found this more compelling. So just shoot me an email and I will schedule time to talk to you about panel feedback. I don't think I missed any of those questions. I had a lot of them to go through. I'm just going to run back. Please, if you have other questions, use the chat function. Just going back through, I think I've answered almost all of those. One quick other question I'm seeing is, does the panel base its decisions solely on the materials we submit? Yes, primarily. The narrative you submit, the supporting documents, that's what they're reviewing. The only time they would involve something else is if there is something in the public domain. I use the example of your executive director has just quit, or you're in a search for your director of education or your preservation director. If that's in the public domain, we're going to know about it, and that's fair game to talk about. If you know that a key position is leaving, while you can't amend your application, you should definitely let me know. I will find out anyway. I'm a good detective. The internet is filled with information, but it's always better for me to hear from you if there's a change that you know is happening and letting me know your process. Any other questions? I'm going to accept through the chat function. This is kind of the last call because I think I've gone through them all. It looks like I may not have any other questions. So again, I want to encourage you to reach out to me, Kristin Herron. My phone number and my email are in front of you. Always good to email me first so we can set up a phone meeting if you want to talk. I just find it's better than playing phone tag. With the application opening soon, within the next 2 weeks, I want to let you know one other thing. You can ask me any question at any time. Once the application goes live, I am not at liberty to discuss content. I can only really talk about technical components of applying. So if you have ideas of different projects and you're not sure what the best fit is for NYSCA, or you're not sure how to bundle your requests together, please reach out to me and schedule time to talk to me before about the 22nd of February. Once that application goes live, you can ask me those questions, but I won't be able to answer them, and I would rather be able to answer them now when I can be more free with my thoughts. I will never tell you what to do, but I will try to advise you the best I can based on NYSCA's mission and based on how I know our peer reviewers, our panelists, will look at your request. I also always encourage folks to have someone else read their application before you submit it. Someone maybe who's not one of your colleagues. It's always good for that other eye to look at it to see what questions there are. When an application begs questions and that leads the panel to steamroll with more and more questions, that's when I know an application is not headed for the conclusion that you want it to be. So that is sometimes a way to help your application by having an outsider read it. Otherwise, I'm going to take one more look to see if I have any questions that have popped in. Otherwise, I thank you for this. Again, the recording will be on our website. If you want to go over anything, please be in touch. I wish you all the best, and I look forward to seeing your applications this year. Thanks, and have a great day.